Welcome back, everyone. You know we love to dig deep into some fascinating sources. And this time, well, you've given us some amazing material. This time, we're taking a trip to Kerala. We're going to explore its culture, its history, through this really unique lens, the Aithihyamala. I mean, what a title, right? And of course, we'll be talking about the person who collected all these stories, Kadarathil Sankuni. So maybe a good place to start is just what is this Aithihyamala? Like, what are we actually dealing with here?
Yeah, I mean, you can think of it really as this kind of garland of legends, right?
Mm.
That's what the title means. And it really is. It's like this collection of stories, legends, all from Kerala. I mean, some of these, they go back centuries.
Centuries. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was Kodaratil Fankuni who went and documented them all,
Yeah.
like really carefully.
Yeah.
So, thanks to his work, I think we have this really amazing glimpse, into the beliefs, the customs, like how people lived really back in the day in Kerala. And oh, did I mention it's like a huge collection? We're talking well over 100 different legends.
Over 100. Okay, so this isn't just like a little pamphlet of stories. This is a serious work. Okay. Garland of legends. I like that. So when we talk about a wide range of life, right? What kind of stuff are we actually talking about here? Like, who are these characters? What are these stories about?
Oh, I mean, you name it. You have these like powerful magicians, people with like extraordinary abilities. And then you've got these like ethereal yakshis. They're these kind of nature spirits, female figures. It's got that mythical element. But then you also have like real historical figures, feudal rulers, right? Those who were shaping the politics of the time.
Oh, interesting. So it's like a blend of history and myth.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are poets, of course, some super talented, others well, maybe a bit full of themselves, But then you get into some really unique stuff. There's like Kalarapayattu, that martial art form. They have their own like experts featured.
Okay. I'm starting to see the wide range of life part now. Keep going.
And then, Ayurveda plays a big role. So you have those practitioners, courtiers, people in the royal courts, even elephants in their mahouts. And, oh, you can't forget the tantric experts. Those stories are always intriguing.
Now, that's what I'm talking about. So we've got royalty, warriors, healers, and even a touch of magic.
Absolutely. The Aithihyamala doesn't hold back.
Right. And before we go too far, you mentioned some specific stories before, right? The 12 children of Varuchi and Parai, Kamakalam Kachuni, Kadamatavtu Katanar. What's the deal with those?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those are like the heavy hitters. Those are some of the most famous, most loved stories in the whole collection. Legend of the 12 children, they sometimes call it Parai Pedapantharukalam. It's ingrained in Kerala's cultural memory.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and then Kamakum Kachuni, he's kind of like this Robin Hood figure, taking from the rich, helping the poor. And then Kadamata de Katanar, his stories, it's all this like deep faith and incredible magical feats. Talk about captivating.
Okay, so we've got a feel for what's in this Aithihyamala. But we want to go deeper, right? These stories, they're not just fun to read. They tell us something about Kerala itself back then, right? Like what life was like, even the socioeconomic standards, even though the book itself, it was put together later.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So while, Kadarathil Sankuni, he collected all these and published them, early 20th century, the stories themselves, they're like these windows, these little peeks into much earlier times in Kerala's history.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and, when we look closely who the characters are, the society, the themes that pop up again and again, that's how we can really start to understand, the culture, the way society was, the economy, all of that from back then.
Now, I'm curious about the guy who brought all this together, Kadarathil Sankuni. What's his story?
Oh, Sankuni, he was a big deal, really, a scholar. Both in Sanskrit and Malayalam. And he was born in Kottayam back in 1855, lived a good long life, passed away in 1937, deeply connected to like the whole literary tradition of Kerala.
So it sounds like he was perfectly positioned to take on a project like this.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting? He started like really seriously documenting these stories, these oral narratives, around 1909.
1909, wow. So this was a long time coming. And where did people first get to experience these stories? Like, how did he share them?
Well, first they were published, but like in installments. Serially. And it was in this literary magazine called Bhashapashini, one of the big ones in Malayalam at the time. So people were getting these stories like chapter by chapter almost.
Almost like a soap opera for these legends.
Exactly. And it got people hooked. You had so many stories. So finally he decided, let's put them all together.
Gotcha. So that's how we ended up with the Aithihyamala as we know it.
Yep. 8 whole volumes.
Yeah.
Published, early 20th century. Boom. the Aithihyamala, a permanent record of over 100 legends. I mean, that's dedication.
Over 100. That's incredible. Talk about preserving history. All right, so these stories, they're obviously entertaining, but let's dig deeper. What can the Aithihyamala tell us about the culture of Kerala back then?
Oh, I mean, this is where it gets really interesting. The Aithihyamala, it's like this incredible cultural document, you know.
Yeah.
We can learn so much about the beliefs, the customs, how society was structured, all from that time period.
Okay, give me some examples.
Well, for one, you see these constant themes of mythology, folklore, all mixed in with everyday life, like gods and goddesses, they're everywhere. Rishis, those revered sages, siddhas, those with spiritual powers, and even like mythical beings, like yakshagandharvas, it's all there.
So it sounds like spirituality and mythology, they were deeply embedded in the culture.
Deeply. And it's interesting, you have this blend of like real history, actual events, but then they're all mixed in with myth and folklore.
Yeah.
It's like they all blur together.
So is it hard to tell what's true and what's legend?
I mean, sometimes, yeah. Like maybe a historical figure, a real person, but then the stories, they get embellished, or a myth, an ancient one, gets adapted to fit like what people understood then. And it makes sense, right? You make a story, an event connected to a myth, and suddenly it has this weight, this importance. It reinforces the whole culture.
Makes sense. And what about the structure of society? What do these stories tell us about who held the power, how things were organized?
Oh, we see it all over. The Aithihyamala shows us a society with very clear hierarchies. Like those feudal rulers, they're everywhere, wielding power. And then you have the poets, right? Their words, they held influence. Some used it for good, others maybe just to boost their own egos.
Right, classic poets. Always a bit of an ego.
Exactly. And then you see this emphasis on physical strength. Kalarapayattu, those martial arts experts, they're always popping up. But it wasn't just about fighting. You have the Ayurvedic practitioners, too, showing how important traditional medicine was. And, of course, the courtiers, those insiders in the royal courts, they were pulling strings, too.
So definitely a hierarchy. What about other parts of life? Like, do we see ordinary people, everyday stuff?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like elephants and their mahouts, those are big. Often depicted as, like, super loyal. Sometimes the elephants even have like legendary qualities. It's pretty cool.
I love that.
And then you have the tantric experts, right? All their secrets, their practices, always a bit mysterious. But importantly, it's not just the big shots. You get stories of normal people, everyday folks who suddenly find themselves in these crazy, extraordinary situations.
That's what I like to hear. The Aithihyamala, it's for everyone.
Exactly. It shows that anyone can become a legend. And, don't forget the magicians with their supernatural powers and the yakshis, those mysterious beings. They add a whole other layer to it.
Okay, so we've talked about hierarchy, but what about the actual socioeconomic situation? Like, what can these stories tell us about how the economy worked, the standards of living?
Okay, well, those feudal rulers, right. Not only did they hold power, but it's very likely that they also controlled most of the land, most of the resources. So that tells us something about how wealth was distributed back then.
Right, definitely not a socialist utopia.
Not at all. And the Aithihyamala shows us a society very much divided by caste, like the story of Varuchi and Parai. She was a woman from the Parayar caste. And the story just mentions it without any judgment. It's just a part of life, It tells us something about the social reality back then.
Right, and we're not endorsing these divisions. We're just observing what the stories tell us. Beyond caste, what about the different jobs people had? Can we learn anything about that?
Absolutely. Like the poets, the Ayurvedic practitioners, the courtiers, we see them over and over. That tells us there was a division of labor, right? And these weren't just random jobs. They were important enough to be included in the stories. So they must have held some social standing. They contributed to the economy in different ways.
Okay, so society wasn't just about rulers and warriors. There are other skilled professions, too.
Exactly. Like the Ayurvedic practitioners, they show us how important traditional healing was. And the poets, well, it tells us that art and intellect, those were valued too.
Definitely a more holistic view of society than I initially thought. What about religion? Did it play a big role?
Oh, huge role. Temples and religious figures, they're everywhere in the Aithihyamala. Like, remember the 12 children of Varuchi? They were connected to various temples. This tells us that religious institutions were at the center of life.
Yeah.
And they weren't just for prayer, right? They were social hubs, cultural centers, sometimes even involved in the economy.
Interesting. So these temples weren't just religious places. They were woven into the fabric of society.
Exactly. Now, one thing that caught my eye in the index was a story titled Koji Kotangaredi, which means Kojikodi Market. Do you think this gives us any clues about, trade and economic activity back then?
Oh, totally. Even just the title, right? It tells us there were marketplaces, trade networks, people buying, selling, exchanging goods. It must have been a big part of life to have its own story. And I bet if we look through the other titles, we'll find more hints about how the economy worked, like maybe mentions of specific jobs, ways of making a living, little glimpses into the past.
It's like a historical treasure hunt.
Haha, kind of. Okay, so we've seen how the Aithihyamala can teach us about life centuries ago, about its society, its economy. But I'm curious, it's an old book, right? But it's still super popular in Kerala. Why?
Yeah, that's a great question. Why do people still care about these old legends? Well, I think it's more than just stories, The Aithihyamala, it's considered a classic of Malayalam literature. It's like this treasure chest full of Kerala's past. I read this one Goodreads review. It said the book is like the key to understanding the magical landscape of Kerala, its heritage.
Beautiful.
Right. And these stories, they come from a time when religion was just like a normal part of life. Before science and technology changed everything, it's a whole different way of seeing the world.
Totally. And, it's not just popular among readers. Like, the book itself, it's been published and reprinted so many times.
Yeah. Big publishers like Readier Press, National Bookstall, DC Books, they've all published it.
Yeah.
And it sells. That tells you something.
Definitely. So what are these reviewers saying? Why do they love it so much?
Well, one reviewer said straight up that every Malayali should read it. Like, it's required reading if you want to understand Kerala's culture,
That's a strong endorsement.
Right. And then another reviewer said it's like the best resource for myths and legends from Kerala, like
Right.
the ultimate guide.
Wow, that's high praise.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But some reviewers did mention that the language is a bit old-fashioned. It was written over a century ago.
Makes sense. Language changes.
Yeah, exactly. And one reviewer said it's like looking through a window into the past. And they made a really interesting point. If someone were to collect legends today, it'd be a totally different book, right? Because society has changed, so have the stories.
That's so true. Every generation has its own stories to tell.
Right. And one last thing, one reviewer pointed out that the book focuses on certain regions of Kerala. Like, there aren't many stories from southern Travancore, so it's not like a perfectly complete picture of the whole state.
Interesting. So it's important to remember that even with 100 stories, there's always more to explore.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
There's always more to discover, more to learn about Kerala's rich history and culture.
All right, so wrapping things up here, it's clear that the Aithihyamala is much more than just a collection of fun stories. It's a window into the past, into the beliefs, customs, and even the social and economic structures of Kerala from centuries ago. And we owe a big thank you to Kodarathil Sankuni for preserving these incredible legends.
Couldn't agree more. He gave us an amazing gift with this collection.
He really did. So for you, our listener, as you think about these legends, how do you think the values, the social structures from back then compare to Kerala today? What can we learn from these stories about how cultures change, how beliefs evolve? It's something to ponder for sure. And hey, if you're interested, definitely check out the Aithihyamala, dive into Kerala's history. And as always, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.